I would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Cultworthy. I'm your host, Antonio, and here we are, the fourth, count 'em, fourth annual High School Royale podcast double feature, where my co-host of Back to the Balcony, Justin Henson, joins me to talk about some of our favorite high school movies as we pit them against each other. And boy, do we have some great ones for you this year. So before we get into that, let me introduce my guest, my co-host of Back to the Balcony and frequent collaborator, Justin Henson of the Movie Wire podcast. What's up?
I, again, look forward to this each and every year, and it's nice to take off our jackets and just talk movies without any biased opinions in the background. So this one, I think we have a great lineup this year, and I can't wait to talk about it. And I think we're going to have a couple disagreements, but I think it's going to be a very fun combo.
Well, it's like by this point, I'm trying to find one to prompt a disagreement, right? So we can have our own Siskel and Ebert discourse, because for the most part, you and I have a lot of similar opinions of movies, but where we've had the most discourse and the most debate has been on the High School Royale episodes. So let's go ahead into the Wayback Machine and talk about the films that we have covered in the last 3 episodes as we go into year 4. So we started off with our first double feature, which was 3 O'Clock High and Slaughter High. Now, I don't think anyone's going to disagree that 3 O'Clock High is a masterpiece. It is a classic. It's an underrated gem of a high school movie with a great cast, with a great soundtrack, and some amazing camera work. But Justin did not feel so complimentary of my pick for that year, which was Slaughter High. And why was that?
It was shit. So, way to kick off the tradition of the high school series with just an absolute movie. I was literally laying on the floor holding my head. But I think we did agree it had some cool kill scenes.
I mean, where else are you going to get an acid bath, an acid soda, but my favorite kill of any horror movie of all time, the electrifying orgasm bed scene, which just is, it's one of the best kills of all time. And it's not in a Friday the 13th movie. It's in Slaughter High.
Not only that, but the kills are edgy for the time it came out. So I have to give you credit on that. The kills were good. But if you're going to watch it, just fast forward the damn movie and get to the kills and call it a day.
Just watch the clip reel. I get it. Okay, so the next year we did our first double podcast. So we started off with Angus and then Class of 1984. I brought Angus to the mix. I think we both agree that Angus is a very special film, very of its time, 1995. Great soundtrack, great performances. George C. Scott and Kathy Bates performances. It's just kind of a classic. And I feel like it's slowly making a rediscovery as people are discovering the soundtrack first and then going back and seeing the movie. And then you pitted it against Class of 1984, which I also agreed is another underrated gem. And I don't think we had any issues with that episode. It was the next one that we definitely had some conversations about. You brought Mr. Holland's Opus to the table, and I brought Massacre at Central High. And that might have been like the first real heated discussion, because I don't like your movie and you didn't like mine.
It's a Justin movie. It's an artificial emotional ride. I mean, it's hard not to have a little bit of heart with Mr. Holland's Opus and shed a tear. And if you lie to yourself and say you didn't have the temptation to cry, you did.
Right. And my opinion was, oh, it's Richard Dreyfuss playing a self-absorbed asshole. Gee, we've never seen that before.
He's such a good asshole, though. And that's the whole point of it. You're crying because you're crying for an asshole. You know you've done a great job when you have to cry for just a self-absorbed asshole. So that's a win for Mr. Holland's Opus.
All right. The following year, I had a great time with, although you kind of broke protocol and brought a college movie to the high school battle, but I didn't get upset because I figured the main character, and that was Bob Beluga Luga 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 Luga, is technically a child mind, right? So he's kind of like a high school attitude on a campus of a college, and that was Big Man on Campus. And we pitted that against My Bodyguard with Matt Dillon. And I think that was a really great combination because both kind of like an outside-ish character finding a friend that doesn't really fit into the world either, and then the world discovering that there's more between these two guys and acceptance. That was a really great episode, and Big Man on Campus is a very special movie that I had to forgive the fact that you brought a college film to a high school battle.
When I did the rewatch on it, I didn't even think about it. By the time the credits rolled, I was like, I haven't heard of any real discussion on this movie, and it needs to come to the surface because it is such an overlooked and underrated movie. And I think that one was a great conversation, and I'm glad we had it. It's one of my favorite episodes because it's one that I don't think we had any real debate in that episode, but rather some underrated movies. And I think Big Man on Campus, still, if you haven't seen it, watch it. And it'll actually go into a comparison of another movie we're going to talk about in our high school series here.
Yeah, I bet. And then the last one that we finished off that double feature was we did Hiding Out with John Cryer and Keith Coogan, and then you brought, unfortunately, Get Over It, starring Ben Foster and Kirsten Dunst, which I almost quit both podcasts because of that film. You made me watch something so unbearable that
it wasn't as unbearable what you introduced me to the first go around in this series. So, you know what? I get it. I had to pick something that, it's just goofy fun for me. I absolutely love it. It hits all the notes that I like, and I know it would have pissed you off, and I absolutely love that it did.
Thank God it had Martin Short in it, because that's what kind of saved the movie for me a little bit. Oh, and Cisco, because Cisco is just that good.
Ice your front bum. Ice your front bum.
That's what we've done the last 3 years of the High School Royale battle. And so this year, we have brought 4 bangers. Episode number 1, I have brought to the show 1985's TUFF TURF, starring James Spader, Kim Richards, and Robert Downey Jr. in an early role. And Justin has pitted his film against it. What did you bring?
I brought 1987's The Principal, starring Jim Belushi and Louis Gossett Jr.
And then next week, the double feature is going to be my pick, which is a very obscure Albert Pune film from the Cannon Film Library called Dangerously Close, about an underground secret society of high school preppies and jocks that murder underperforming high school kids to keep the high school stats high at their school. What a great concept. And then, Justin, what are you bringing to battle against that film?
Not such a great concept. I brought 1992's... Oh, shit, I don't even want to say it. Encino Man, starring Brendan Fraser, Pauly Shore. You know what? On Back to the Balcony, I figured, why not start with a Pauly Shore movie here, and then we'll just ease into all the thumbs down movies probably next year with Pauly Shore with Siskel and Ebert. So to me, I thought it's going to add a little bit of fun, and I think everybody can agree that it is very, very stupid, but a level of fun.
It's a lot of fun, and it's a classic, and it's highly quotable, and a lot of people who are our age know it and love it. So I have no objection to Encino Man being on the group. And I love your idea. I think next year on Back to the Balcony, we should just do a whole month of Pauly Shore, right? Knock out the top 4 Pauly Shore films, because really there's only top 4 of them, in my opinion. So
I'll get the bottle of bourbon ready.
We should. Oh, God. You got to whiz the juice, man. Whiz the juice. God. All right. So that's next week. So let's get into this week's episode. So since you're the guest, man, I just kind of want to know why you brought 1987's The Principal to the High School Battle Royale.
So I bought The Principal mainly because, and it's almost embarrassing to say, but this was my first Jim Belushi film, and I became a fan of Jim Belushi going into the 90s because I love the progression of his career where he almost acts here as the next action star. And then they kind of fast forward his career to what we see action stars at the end of their career by cliche movies, throwing in uh, ridiculous plot points or partners. They just said, let's just forget Jim Belushi and we'll go Red Heat, and then we'll do Canine. So, and then he just went into stupid comedy. So, but I love Jim Belushi. I think he in the 80s is so recognizable. He is so fun to watch with his just smug attitude. He is almost the action star without the build. So, and I really appreciate that as just kind of the average Joe who wants to be an action star. But I remember seeing The Principal one time, and I think it was on HBO or some cable channel, and it was just almost raw, taboo, and just gross, especially as a kid when you're seeing a school setting and a teacher just going rogue. It is something that just really enticed me, and it had a lot of influence on movies going forward as Dangerous Minds, The Substitute, you name it. So I think when we take a school topic and have that grunginess to it, it's something that audiences weren't really turned on to, but kids and teachers, I'm sure, just flock to a movie like this that covers a taboo situational setting like a school. So to me, I thought this was a great time to bring a very taboo school setting movie to the show.
All right, so let's get into it. As always, cue dramatic music. The year is 1987, and Jim Belushi stars as Rick Latimer, a rebellious high school teacher who's given a second chance, though not in the way he expects. After a barroom brawl, Latimer is transferred to Brandale High, an inner-city high school plagued by violence, drugs, and fear. As the new principal, Latimer is thrown into a war zone where students rule and teachers survive. Belushi brings both intensity and heart to his role, portraying a flawed but determined man who refuses to back down. Backed by strong performances, notably by Louis Gossett Jr. and Ray Dong Chong, the principal showcases Belushi's ability to balance action with emotional depth and humor, making it a curious and captivating cult favorite of the 1980s. Okay, so I totally agree with you about the Belushi thing. It's like, this is my take on him. I'm not a Belushi hater, but I'm not a Belushi fan. My opinion of the man is I like Belushi when he is a sidekick or a secondary character more than I do when he's the lead. And I agree with you, like, the rougher start he had in the 80s and these rougher roles, I liked better than his goofy comedies, because that's what they were in goofy comedies. The one exception to the rule would be Curly Sue, which he's charming. He really matches the cuteness of that little girl. But to this day, I still don't understand how the hell Kelly Lynch finds the dude attractive. Even as he's cleaned up, I'm like, no, that's Kelly Lynch. She's not falling for Jim Belushi. Unless that's the point. Like, the rich boyfriend is such an asshole that she finds Jim Belushi attractive. But I digress.
It could be an attraction to the hairline. I don't know. People might find that attractive, but I think it's Belushi's mantra of the confidence, the assholeness of him, just the way he presents himself on screen. It's almost like every character in every movie. He doesn't really change his range. He just stays true to himself. And I think we see that here with the principal, but just up a couple octaves of just, I don't really give a fuck at this point. You know what? I lost my marriage. I lost my relationship. I have potential of losing my job. So I'm not dealing with any adolescent crap from kids. And I think when we go into that, I think that was a success of Curly Sue, is we have the Belushi character and all these roles leading up to it, where we see kind of just tap your toe into the water feeling with K9. And then we see kind of a different side of him during the climax. And then we go into the true Belushi of Curly Sue. And I think that's where we start to see his range of really transitioning from just the overall, I want to be an action star, but I have no range to do so, into this almost sensual comedian that just wants to be there to show what he can do. So, and I think Curly Sue, I love that you brought that up, because I think that was a transition for him to really go forward with what he wanted to do in his career. And I think it was a right move for him. It's probably not the most successful move for him, but it was a right move for him.
Yeah, and I get it, because you don't want to get stuck in the typecast of the characters he was playing, like the disgruntled cop or the devil may care principal, right? Who has to rough up some kids. So yeah, I agree with you on that. But he works in this movie. This movie works. I'm not sure if we discussed my feelings of this film. I like it. I like it for the fact that this is when Hollywood started taking a page out of grindhouse and exploitation cinema. We already covered Massacre at Central High and Class of 1984. Very low rent drive in movies, right? They weren't big budget films, they weren't high profile films, but they touched enough audiences in the subgenres, right? On the video store shelf, on the cable networks, that got studios interested in what people were watching that wasn't just the blockbuster stuff. Again, we're talking about the mid-budget thriller. And just like the mid-budget comedy and mid-budget romance film, those don't exist anymore. I feel like people are trying to bring them back, but this movie would be like a streaming film now, right? It was a higher tier version of a B movie, but it worked. And the fact that we did see higher profile versions of this later, Tom Berenger in The Substitute, at least the first one, that's a banging movie. It's got higher production value. It's still a B movie, but it's got some credibility to it. And then they full on put Michelle Pfeiffer in another B movie. They took essentially Stand and Deliver and The Principal and squished them together and made Dangerous Minds, and it was a hit. So I get it. I like it when Hollywood takes a page from the dark side of the industry, from the B movie, grindhouse, and drive-in theaters. And that's where I think this film comes in, because it is just a touch above exploitation, but can still be considered a highbrow top-tier film.
It really does act as an exploitation film when it comes to especially the setting on how the characters interact. And I know when we go into the 90s, early 2000s, they tried to up it an octave to 187, starring Samuel L. Jackson, that just didn't have that same rawness. It didn't have that same feeling. It took just the topic and the setting and just went just pure ugliness with it. Here, it does work because it actually adds a conflict of just not a singular character, but just the environment is a toxic environment. It's a very uncomfortable environment. You have a certain antagonist that we do go up against, but we even have moments of this is just a bad kid in the wrong direction. It's the setting here that really does drive this movie, and Belushi interacts with this setting to his full extent, where he's walking through with these wide angle shots, he's interacting with the cast, he's deputizing the staff. And that is a scary statement when it comes to this, is the power of the dialogue here. It really does stay with you. When you hear the statement in a school for the first time, you're deputizing the staff in a school. That is terrifying. And that just catapults how we're going to feel about this movie, not just with how our principal is going to interact with the kids or what the climax is going to be, but how is this setting going to interact? How are the kids going to interact with the setting? And that's what makes this movie work when it comes to just a pure rawness factor of it. This is a dialogue driven movie, even if it's not at the surface level. If you actually listen to the words that are being spoken, the words are just as terrifying as how our characters interact.
So the one thing I can say to that is that this is now the second film, in my opinion, that we've talked about on this uh, episode run of High School Royale, and that is that this movie is essentially a Western. This movie is high noon. Again, just like 3 o'clock high was high noon in the sense of like there's a timetable on things. This is high noon in the fact that he shows up and no one wants him there. And no one wants him to do the things that he's doing because they don't want to face the vengeance of this gang in the high school. And at the end of the day, he's pretty much solo with his one guy, Louis Gossett Jr., to help him out. It's high noon. It is a Western concept in this kind of grungy, rundown inner city high school. And on that note, too, it's like, I don't know, movies like this growing up mess me up, dude. Like, there's something about movies like this or like Judgment Night where it's like, oh, anytime I take a wrong turn off a freeway, I'm going to get killed by gang members, right? And I think that as a kid, I worried about high schools run by literal gang members and drug dealers a lot more than I should have. I mean, I went to a small high school town in a population of like 200,000 people. not a lot of people. It was like a third of the state, right? And I was like, are there drug dealers here? Who's the gang leader, right? Because I grew up watching this kind of shit. I think that we worried about schools being like this a little too much, and this kind of built this false representation that every high school needed a principal with a baseball bat. On that note, how funny is it that this movie came out almost simultaneously with Lean on Me, which is like the same movie, but on a higher level? They take the high road.
You almost have to watch as a double feature just so you kind of feel
Dude.
good.
That is like the best high school double feature I can think of. Is The Principal and Lean on Me. I'm doing that for my cult movie night, 100%.
We just need to get AI for them to hug at the end of it with Morgan Freeman and Jim Belushi as they just hug as principals. I think that should be a third movie. But I think...
Fuck that, dude. This is the generation of crossovers, intellectual properties. We need a Lean on Me principal crossover. I don't care if it's 40 years later. I need this in my life.
Called The School Board. That's the next movie. But I love the fact that you compared it to a Western, and this one really does shout that, but it recognizes that it's going that route. And we even see that during the final moments where the most brilliant shot of the movie is what we normally get from a stereotypical Western is you have the black costume and the white suit to symbolize good versus evil. You have the shadow versus the sun. Here we have our antagonist walking in from the sun into the dark, and our protagonist is in the dark, welcoming this guy into the dark. So this is one where it's very symbolic, and whether it's intentional or not, it doesn't matter because it works and it's identifiable on what the filmmakers are trying to do here is really make a symbolic message of, is this antagonist really a bad person, or is it the environment that's bad? And that's what I think is really brilliant. It's a really, like I talked to earlier, it's a set-driven piece. This is an establishment as the antagonist, not necessarily the kid. We even see it from the teachers in the beginning, where they've given up on the kids. So what the real antagonist here is the system that's given up on these kids. And we see that character walk into the school, into the darkness to battle not just our principal, but authoritarian figures and the system, not specifically Jim Belushi, because we even have a moment when he first talks to our villain, if you will, where there's a moment where he says, you can still walk away. There was a bit of sympathy there, but he knows that there is change. He knows that he's not the issue. So this one is really about the villain being the setting. And I think it's really brilliantly done on not focusing on just a stereotypical kid being a bad kid, being that one villain, that one gang member, because they don't start there, they grow there. And that's what this movie is really about, is how we get to a kid being a villain.
Well, and it is stereotypical, but it works in a movie like this, where, as in Class of 1984, the gang goes after the teacher's wife and family because he has things that he cares about. He has things that he doesn't want to lose. So him standing up for the system, it would make the most sense that he would back down if they went after his family, went after his wife, which they do. In this, though, Belushi has no one to lose. And so what they do is they attack the people that he shows interest in helping, right? Like at first he has no emotional attachment to Radon Chong or to Jacob Vargas or Isai Morales' character. He's just there to be like the principal. Let me help you out of trouble, kid, blah, blah, blah. And then once the emotional investment happens, the gang jumps on that. And they do. They literally steal a scene right from Class of 1984 where the Emil character is the Michael J. Fox character, and they brutally beat him, nearly kill him, just to shake the principal off of their backs. So I don't take offense to the fact that that is a blatant ripoff, because all these movies really are. It's, can you take these influences and allusions to previous films and make something that feels entirely original and entirely its own self-encompassed film? And this does that, and it has a lot to do with the cast, because the script really isn't that great. The direction, it's got some moments, but it doesn't really flow. It is the magnetism of the cast that works. It's Belushi, it's Gossett Jr., it's Isai Morales, painfully underused in this film. He shows up, he's like in the first 20 minutes and he kind of just fizzles out and they focus on the Jacob Vargas character, which I like him. I like him a lot, but I think you and I just praised Isai Morales so much in La Bamba, and I saw him pop up in this. I'm like, oh, that's right, I forgot he's in this, and then he's not. So that was kind of disappointing for me.
Well, I'm going to disagree on the dialogue here because I think it's so easy to overlook the dialogue because of what's happening on
Okay.
screen. Because
Okay.
because we actually do get some good lines here that actually support where this movie's going from. We do, and don't get me wrong, we do get that stereotypical the teachers against the kids, the very simplistic lines. We do get cliche lines like that, but it does have moments. And I think what Christopher Kane does here as our director is really go in on it. And even if it's the most simplistic dialogue, he amplifies it with his direction, where we get an intimate focus on what he wants. He's in complete control of what he wants us to listen to. But this is the type of movie that we don't want to listen to dialogue. We don't want to see, we want to see the vision. We want to see the danger, the the moments that are uncomfortable. We kind of just human nature is we output that where we don't want to take it in. We just go along for the journey. But even when we lead up to it to the final scene where it's not stereotypical, where we have Jim Belushi running from the villain in the shower, where that is brilliantly directed by Kane. He really does elongate that, where it's not the let's battle in the hallways. Let's make it simple. Let's have a dark moment where it's just a fist fight. We have vulnerabilities with our characters that comes from the writing where we don't have just action scene after action scene. We do have both characters show vulnerabilities and fear. Belushi's running away. We have our antagonist asking another character to shoot for him. And again,
Yeah.
now that would seem cliche because we've seen it over and over again of having somebody else do the dirty work, but then it still is a brilliant strategy. And again, it goes back to the writing of this isn't a bad kid. The one that was asked to kill isn't a bad kid. The writing strategically sets this up so we can focus on, in reflection, who the main villain is. And I'll go back to my main point. It's the setting. So I think it's so easy to overlook the writing here, but it's strategic writing.
I think Christopher Kane is a very interesting filmmaker. Just after this movie, the next year, he did Young Guns, which I think he really fixed a lot of the issues I have with this film in terms of pacing. Action scenes he does great with. Like the whole climax of The Principal is fantastic. That whole last fight scene is great. It's everything in between, the exposition scenes that I have some issues with. And I feel he fixes that a lot in Young Guns, but it doesn't take away from this movie. I still think this is a very solid film. It's probably Belushi's best solo effort, I would say. I think so. Some people might disagree with me because I'm not a huge fan of his comedies, but I think that he really held his own on this. And it's interesting because he was actually the third choice for this role. Michael Keaton was the number one choice, and Michael Keaton was still in comedy mode yet. He hadn't made Batman yet. Batman is the one that kind of flipped that whole perception of what Michael Keaton was to be a more serious thing. And this could have done it before Batman. And then the other person that was brought into the mix was Gary Busey. And then Gary Busey couldn't do it because he was in the middle of Lethal Weapon. And so Jim Belushi was a third choice. Jim Belushi, who they went with. I think it'd be harder to create a human relationship and connection with Gary Busey. I've seen him play a good guy. He just plays such a good bad guy. I feel that he would have brought more of that Tom Berenger energy from the substitute to the role, where it's you just want him to kick ass. You don't want him to learn anything. You don't want him to be a better person. You just want him to kick ass. So I think that they did a good job with picking Belushi in this role.
I think it came down to Keaton and Belushi because, again, probably the definition of this is you have to have a receding hairline. That's what's going to make it relatable. Right. But Busey, you're
slight curl, slight punch, receding hairline.
And Busey is kind of the odd man out in that. It's like something here doesn't belong. And you're absolutely right. He wouldn't have had that relatability factor. It's like he's just there. And it would be hard to kind of root for him because we saw it in Batman from Keaton. I can see that relatability, that middle America kind of guy, that average Joe. And that's what this role really needed. And I think that's where Belushi really does have a man at his wit's end. He lives in a studio apartment. His character just feels like he lives in a studio apartment. So I think that's what really drives it. And we want to hang on to this character where he literally has nothing to lose at this point. And I think that's what's really enticing about how they attack this character is he's a loner and he is ready to just kick some ass. And it has that B movie tone to it. But again, with a little bit of depth that I think is not realized. But I think it is that drive-in movie that you go and you expect to have just scene after scene of just action, and you get a little bit more than that. And I think that's what really took audiences by surprise on how well this movie actually combines itself to have that raw, unconventional feeling. And I think this is one of those movies that, if you go back today, it still stays relevant on the thrills. If you were a first time viewer of this, even if you've seen Dangerous Minds 187 or The Substitute, this one I still think is going to go above the rest, even with it being from the 80s, because it really focuses on the technical aspects versus just the characters, just the bad versus good. It really combines all the elements to make it work.
I can't believe you said that Jim Belushi is essentially the studio apartment of Hollywood actors. I know that's not what you were saying, but that's the way I interpreted your little spiel about
It's
him being
accurate
the studio
now.
apartment. No, so at the end of the day, like I will recap just saying, like I think this is a really great piece of the '80s. It is just above Grindhouse. It is just above B movie drive-in fodder, but it's not quite like top tier cinema. But that's when films like this had a home. Like this would be the third or fourth screen in a megaplex. And if everything was sold out, hey, we'll go watch the 7:15 of The Principal and we're going to like it. Like that's where movies like this really, really made a name for themselves and found a home. And then again on home video. And yeah, I mean, this is that box art walking through Blockbuster, just remembering that poster of him and Gossett with the baseball bat. It's like, oh, the principal, I bet he kicks some ass. And he does, you know?
Nothing says back to school than watching a principal just kick some ass with Gossett Jr. And this one is a tradition at the end of the summer, just like what we talked about with the great outdoors on our Back to the Balcony. This one is my end of summer watch.
All right, so Battle Royale bonus points for this one is him literally driving his motorcycle 60 miles an hour down the hallway of a school through the door of a classroom to stop an assault. I thought that was great.
I still go back to the scene where his bike's destroyed and the students give that little ounce of goodness and reconstruct his motorcycle with El Principal on the bike. So that one, I think,
Right, that was his stand and deliver moment.
it was. And again, it's that little seed of what I spoke to earlier, where it shows the goodness in the kids and not so much the establishment. And I think that's where this movie really does plant its foot in to tell you, look deeper in this one.
All right, so now it's my turn to bring my film to the mix. I brought 1985's TUFF TURF, starring James Spader. Cue dramatic music. The year is 1985, and James Spader stars as Morgan Hiller, a privileged teen uprooted from Connecticut to a gritty Los Angeles high school after his father's business goes under. Struggling to fit in, Morgan clashes with a local gang led by Nick Hauser, especially after he falls for Nick's lovely girlfriend Frankie, played by Kim Richards of Escape from Witch Mountain. With its punk-infused soundtrack, neon-drenched visuals, and themes of outsider identity, this film captures the era's rebellious spirit. Spader delivers a charismatic performance, hinting at the darker roles he would later become famous for. Though not a critical success, the film has gained cult status over the years for its high melodramatic style, memorable music, including performances by the Jim Carroll Band, and a snapshot of 80s youth culture and dancing. And yes, there was a time where Robert Downey Jr. was the second banana in movies. This is TUFF TURF. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that this was probably not the highest on the Justin meter of film. Am I wrong?
I really fucking hated this movie.
I knew it. This was the one. This was my ringer, dude. I brought this in just to piss you off.
It got to the point where this is one of mine. I'm going to lay on the floor, stretch my back, and hope to God this movie ends soon. This is when we get to the climax, and I'm going to skip ahead of it. where the editing is so bad. There's a scene where he's grabbing this piece of wood with nails in it, and if you go back to it, the the there's two pieces of wood. Then we cut to him grabbing it. There's one piece of wood, and it's moved closer to his body to just conveniently for him to grab it. And then the climax just cuts into a dance number. I love the music. I love the idea of it. And my attention would go back to the screen when we would get those perfectly choreographed scenes that everybody's dancing in the same kind of tone and the same kind of line dance, whatever it may be. I love those elements, but it doesn't match the tone. It is just stupid.
I think there's a lot to kind of push the dirt away on this film, and why I think it's brilliant, because it's a brilliant movie, and there's people that'll back me up on this. So for one, the concept of the film is that Spader is actually like a waspy young man. His family were wealthy. His dad was like a real estate developer in Connecticut or something. He loses his practice, and so they end up in gritty, shitty LA, and his dad has no choice but to be a taxi cab driver. And then Spader, who was like this preppy prick, this is the best part about it. When he was in these prep schools, he essentially was cosplaying as a tough guy, right? He was wearing his leather jackets. He was reading Kerouac and shit off the roof. Like, he was doing things that he had probably seen or read in magazines of what rebellious teens do, and creates this persona to be the bad kid of these preppy institutions. But now that he's in LA, now he's with the real shit, right? So he brings like his fake tough guy attitude to the street, to the school, not understanding like, oh, they really kill motherfuckers out here. And once again, I think that movies like this made me fear high school way too much, because I'm like, oh, I'm going to get run over in the parking lot by the rival gang, right? Like, these guys are absolute killers. What I like about this particular group of gang members that they don't really touch in the principal is they've got like these white hood rat girls that are like following them around, are cheering them on for all this nasty shit they're doing, for all the violent shit they're doing. The girl that plays Frankie, Kim Richards, she's the little girl from Escape to Witch Mountain, right? She's a Disney icon. And here she is with her crimped hair that goes down to like her knees. And she's like helping them rob guys on the street. She's a bad girl who kind of falls for James Spader. I love that. Dare I say, it's almost Shakespearean how this works, right? He may be the prince from Mantua who comes to Padua and gets fucked up by gang members. I like what this movie does. And then Robert Downey Jr., early in his career, coming on strong as Morgan, the best friend. Dude, that's a performance. That is a performance if I've ever seen one.
I'm going to dissect this a little bit because this is going to be a lot. So I will give you the point of the Romeo and Juliet Shakespearean theme of this, but it doesn't go far enough. And I think that's the overlaying theme of this movie is it doesn't know where it wants to lean. We have the conflict between the gang members or whatever, but that's all fine and dandy because they'll beat somebody up and then they'll just have a dance off in a concert setting. So it really is segmented on what is trying to portray. There's no rhyme, reason, organization to it. And that's my main problem to it. When it goes into the James Spader romance, I like that stuff. But I think these characters are so one-dimensional. They have no dialogue to really go off or work with anything. I have no problem with the performances here. I'm a huge Spader fan, but I think the performances here are all fine. I just don't think there's any organization or idea of where they want these characters to go, except for we're going to have a final battle and we're going to have a final dance off in the climax. That's what we are intending to get to, but there's nothing in the middle to really have us care as we get to the climax. It's almost like they ran out of money towards the climax because right when we get that final battle, it's just go, go, go. And it's a climax that takes 7 minutes to get through it. And that's where it just isn't earned. We have James Spader hanging from the ceiling, wanting to be the hero, but it's that Superman syndrome. There's nothing that leads him up to that. He spends most of his time in this movie getting his ass kicked, and then he expects to go up against a gang of 5 to 7 people, and he has the confidence to do that. That's just idiocracy. So give me something to lead up to that. Give me something of the romance, because these two during the romance, the chemistry's there. It works, but the movie needed more to build the stakes as we get into the final moments of the film.
Dude, hard disagree. The Shakespearean quality of this story, I think, is almost unmatched for the 1980s. Think about all of the things that they do to these characters. So we already explained the whole persona of what Morgan, James Spader character's motivation is. The bad kid at the good school, and now he is the kid who's a target of the bad kids at this school. Yet, like the scene where he kind of kidnaps her and her friend with Robert Downey Jr., and they go to like the little golf social club and they sneak in, and shows that he's a great pianist and he sings a song and he's very romantic. Like it shows all these different layers to him and who he is. And the fact that he has a very successful older brother who's like, I'm the important one. Mom and dad love me, and you're just the screw up. You're the rebel. There's so much depth to what his character is based off that relationship. Now, let's go to Frankie, the Kim Richards character. So she's always kind of been like this trashy girl living in a trashy home. Her mom dies. Her dad is such a trashy dude that he can't wait to marry her off. How Shakespearean is that? And he's going to marry her off to the piece of shit gang leader, Nick, who like abuses her and everyone around him, but the dad just wants her out. That is character depth and development if I've ever seen it. And then you find out more about Nick and his dad. You find out about Morgan and his older brother and how he's a piece of shit too, but he uses humor to kind of get through life. Like, I feel there is depth to all these characters. What I will say is I think that it's so on the nose, it's so in your face that it's easy to miss because they don't make you work for it. They just put it there. And I think that where it stumbles a little bit in his character development, but the depth is there. It's on paper. It may not be translated through dialogue the way that I feel like it should be, but it's there and I appreciate it. Like I say, it is such a Shakespearean tale in such a goofy movie.
I think this one's going to be our biggest debate because I'm going to disagree to your disagreement that it has ideas of being Shakespearean and it presents it, but the dialogue doesn't go far enough. We take Matt Clark as the father. He even has that moment where it could have been something. It could have gone further. He's sitting in Spader's room saying, is everything okay? And he pretty much goes, no, yeah. Okay, well, if you need to talk, come find me. Father leaves. This was an opportunity to give depth to these characters. And I will agree to this. I loved the banquet scene. I love the Spader singing. And if that was any other movie, that would be a Justin moment because that did tug at the heartstrings. But that was a seedling to sprout this movie and to really go deeper into this relationship, not just have a relationship around conflict, because we really don't have moments with these characters to really have buy-in to their romance. To say James Spader is rightfully so gonna put his life on the line for this girl. That's what was missing when it comes to the Shakespearean piece of it. There wasn't enough stakes to have the danger element feel relevant. Yeah, I mean, the filmmakers can assume that any teenage boy is going to go up to battle for that one crush, but that's assuming from a writer's perspective. We need more to that to really have that climax matter, to make that relationship matter. Spader, we don't go far enough. And I think the best character of this movie, and it's situational that I actually got sympathy or empathy for, was our Matt Clark character, the father, when he's shot, but that's situational. And we have the sympathy of the situation of, oh, look what my actions have led to. But the emotional stake wasn't there. This is a film of ideas, but the dialogue doesn't support the ideas. And I think it could have been. At an hour and 50 minutes, there should have been more depth to this, but it just goes from situation to situation and it leads nowhere.
No, because this movie is nihilistic as fuck, and that's the whole point. The parents are the perfect example of what's going on, right? So this dad, this big wig, loses his money, his business goes under, they're living in this little 2-bedroom shithole in Los Angeles. He's a taxi driver, James Spader's already accepted, like, this is where we are at, but the mom is still treating this house as if it is a mansion. Like, she's wearing her best Sunday dresses all day. She's making all these little gourmet finger foods. She's walking around with like silver china and platters and stuff like that. Meanwhile, dad is trying to find a job because he knows he can't just do taxi cab driving. There is so much subtext there of like what this family is, but this is the most hot wire topic of this movie. This is where like people might get pissed. Not at me, but at like, if they love this movie, they love it for the wrong reason. The whole point behind the James Spader and Nick confrontation over Frankie is this. Morgan, James Spader, he doesn't love her. He deserves her because he's better than her. He feels like he's entitled enough just to have her. That's why there's no courtship, really. He kind of just goes in. He's like, you're dating this piece of shit gang leader. Look who I am. Look where I come from. It's not about love. It's about, I want this because it's mine. I should have it because I'm better than these people. Meanwhile, the person who I think is most justified in the shit he's doing is the fucking bad guy. Nick is the one who's actually right about this. Who the hell is this douchebag on a bicycle and a leather jacket comes in thinking he can just take my girlfriend? He is not wrong. He's an asshole, but he's not wrong. The juxtaposition of what the hero and the villain in this movie is what makes it so interesting and what makes me like it, because it's a lie. The movie on its surface and what people think it is a lie. James Spader is the villain, and he does villainous things, but we fall for it because he's the nice guy, right? No, he's not. He's a piece of shit. That's why I like this movie, because it's a lie.
These are ideas, and that's where it stays, because when we actually get to it, is you're absolutely right, is we have to like the James Spader character, and the movie spends a lot of time on the boyfriend's dialogue, or actions, I should say, to make him unlikable, but it's merely just actions of him just treating her like a subject, right? But we shouldn't be distracted on that point. Give us something more of substance with the Spader character to make us root for him. We almost relate to the villain of the guy stealing the boyfriend or the girlfriend, sorry, than we do with Spader's character, because when we take the family environment that you related a lot of the plot points, and again, those are ideas. I get it. He's in a new environment, but I almost wanted to instead of spending the 10 minutes with the family of James Spader, I would have rather spend the whole hour and 45 minutes with the family just to see the Spader family and how they interact, because that is a lot of substance there. And I think there is a lot of potential, but we don't really, once it goes outside of that house, it is merely situational. And we have to kind of pick apart what we like about this movie. And we can analyze the hell out of it when it comes to who's the villain, who's the hero. But the movie tries so hard to make Spader this superhero by the end of it, this romantic guy by the end of it. We even saw that again with the banquet scene where he's singing this romantic song.
These are bad people.
They're bad people.
And that's the thing about this movie, is like, this is a movie about bad people. And when you're rooting for who you think is the hero, you have to understand that you're rooting for a bad person.
And I hate that. Give me something more. Either give me something to think about other than who the hell am I supposed to like in this movie? Or give me something to feel. Like, if you're going to treat this movie as almost a Romeo and Juliet subtle theme movie,
but for assholes,
then at least make me really hate somebody. Make it apparent. And I know we don't like hand holding, but this one plays it so safe because it really wants to lean into the likability piece of it, but it doesn't want to go too far. Go all in. Either make this a bunch of bratty teenagers where we just hate everybody because we've all been teenagers. We've all been in that situation, minus the gang, or just have a romance with some stakes built to it. This one just plays it safe in between and just goes through the motions. There's nothing really to attach myself to this movie because I think our filmmakers didn't even know where it wanted to go. This is a movie that looked good on paper when it comes to when it was released in the 80s, where you have the teenage romance, the gangs, all the elements work here for teenagers to put their butts in a seat. But it doesn't age well because we recognize as we mature, this film went nowhere.
Okay, I think it ages great because this is what the whole idea behind Cobra Kai is, right? Like, what happens when you watch Karate Kid where LaRusso is actually the bad guy? Because he kind of is. He puts his shit where it doesn't belong, right? And then Johnny's just a guy who knows karate, and his gang just take care of this weirdo that comes in and starts moving in on his shit, right? Why are you fucking with me, Daniel LaRusso? Why would you pour water all over us at the Halloween party? Other than you're an asshole. That's what this is. Okay, Nick's an asshole, but who are you, James Spader? Like, watch this from the Cobra Kai perspective of like, okay, are these guys like, apart from rolling dudes in the parking lot for their money, what else is going on that makes us think that they deserved what James Spader was doing to them, you know? And again, this is me playing devil's advocate, blee, blah, blah.
The music was way better in The Karate Kid because that told us what we should be feeling. And two, it had a lot more slow motion aspects to it to make us just take in and root for somebody artificially. And you had a wise old guy giving direction. We don't have any of that here. And the only old guy
that doesn't have a Miyagi.
No Miyagi here.
Yeah.
And the one moment we did have a Miyagi moment, the dad just says, "You okay? You good? Okay. Have a good night."
Yeah. And then they shoot him.
Totally separate. But this is where it goes down to pure filmmaking on identifying the opportunity. We had opportunities here to make it either feel artificial to appease the audience or really add a lot more depth without assumption. And I think this movie is dumb when it comes to assuming we know what it is. And I really hate that is it treats the audience almost like an idiot where you fill in the blanks. We're just going to shoot it shot for shot. The transition sucks. The editing sucks. We're going to put some music in here and cross our fingers and hope you guys get the idea. If not, overthink it. And maybe you'll connect to something in this movie. So that when it comes to how segmented, I think that is my biggest problem I have with this movie is it's almost like seeing cinematic darts being thrown at the board, hoping something sticks. It has a lot, like I said, a lot of ideas, but it doesn't do the follow through. It relies on other aspects as fighting scenes or situational moments that make us feel like it should be emotional or just music scenes. And that's what it really banks on because the most prominent scenes we see in here is the multiple choreographed dance scenes to amplify the fun factor. And I think they know that this movie had pacing issues. So we had to insert a lot of these music numbers, these dance numbers, because everything else was pretty lame.
Well, they just make the pacing issues worth of those. But that's what makes this movie fun for me. Okay, so let's talk about some of the ridiculous shit that's in this movie. Because, like, on the surface, it's pretty straightforward, right? But the things they throw in this movie, the club scene specifically, like all of a sudden it turns into almost like a Robert Altman, everything's improvised, people way out of character talking to these rich people and fooling them and tricking them, followed by the little serenade by James Spader. Then we've got the crazy dance scene where she and James Spader go to like this after hours jazz blues rock club that looks like it's meant for like 40-year-olds, but yet these two stroll in, no ID, and she proceeds to do a dance that encompasses no less than 40 cartwheels.
This is a prime example of how deep this movie goes, is we take that banquet scene and Spader goes to our Frankie character and says, "Hey, sit on the piano." She sits on the piano and does absolutely nothing but stare at him. There's no depth. There's no substance. There's no emotional connection here. If this was any other teenager, they would have said, "Get me the fuck off this stage. You're a fucking weirdo." So there is really nothing of substance to really amplify. And that's where I think it really is the stopping point of ridiculous. There's no relatability piece other than fantasy. And if they wanted to go to the fantasy piece of it, we have elements of that. We see it in the climax being the superhero. We have the wanting to get the girl with being up on stage. We have those imaginative aspects of what a teenager wants to feel. But again, it's the follow through. It's just ridiculous. And it does have those moments where, honestly, I'd love to see a remake of this. Just just be a pure musical and just call it what it is.
Yeah, I'll take a remake of this, musical or not. This deserves a second chance for sure. Okay, other ridiculousness to the movie. Robert Downey Jr. is a high schooler, but he plays drums for the Jim Carroll band, which I thought was a stretch. Okay, Jim Carroll, infamously known as the author of the Basketball Diaries and had a punk band, plays several of his songs in the movie, so I thought that was ridiculous. But I think one of my favorite ridiculous moments of the movie is when Robert Downey Jr. shows up to a fight at the end, this infamous warehouse fight with two Doberman pinchers in tow through the roof. He comes in through the roof access with these dogs. He's on the second floor. And I was like, dude, did you scale the wall with these Dobermans? How the hell did you get in here? We saw how Spader did. He had to scale the wall, and you come in through the exact same entrance with two dogs in tow. Don't care. I love it, but still, it's ridiculous.
See, I would have even loved depth of that. Just a single shot of Downey Jr. with two Dobermans on his back. Just give me at least that.
It wouldn't have hurt the movie at all. It would have just made it better.
100%.
Yeah, I knew you were going to feel this way about this movie, and that's why I brought it. I'm not saying this is a guilty pleasure. I think this is such a weird movie. It's such a weird idea. It's such a weird way to play these characters. And Spader supposedly did not realize what this movie was in practice. Apparently, on page, it read a lot more serious. It read like a real, personal character study and reflection of who this guy is. Like, he was attracted to the idea, oh, I'm rich and now I'm poor. That's what he was really going for. This kind of riches to rags, almost like a Charles Dickens-ish kind of novel, right? And then, as they're filming the movie, he's like, wait, what's with all the dancing? And what's with all of this weird stuff I'm doing on the bicycle? And he wouldn't even go see the movie when it came out because he was like, fuck this movie, man. This is not what I signed up for. I'm a serious actor. I'm going to go make John Hughes movies. I think it is funny, though, that his best friend in this movie is Robert Downey Jr., and then 2 years later, he's literally pimping his ass out in a drug party in Less Than Zero. Mwah.
It amazes me. If it wasn't for the strong performances here, and I will give it that, the performances are fine, but again, nothing to work with. But if it wasn't for the strong talent here, this movie, I think, could have destroyed careers because it is so outlandish that it really doesn't give the actors anything to work with. But the fact that Spader and Robert Downey Jr. turned garbage into something at least tolerable is something to really be proud of, to put on a resume. But I can picture that Spader and Downey Jr. wouldn't want to put this one on the resume.
Do you at least concede to the fact that this is cult movie material? Like, this is cult fodder. This is midnight movie content we have here. It's got all the ridiculous tropes. It's got fun, colorful characters. It's got dance scenes out of nowhere. It's got a ridiculous fight scene at the end. And it's got the obligatory punk band in an 80s film. You got Oingo Boingo in Back to School. You got Red Hot Chili Peppers in Thrashin'. You've got the Jim Carroll band in this. I feel like it does fit that mold. I think it's such a great cult movie. And you can get away with so much more by calling it that and embracing it for what it is.
People are going to disagree, but you can get away with a lot more when it comes to the filmmaking here, because there's a difference between being a cult movie with ridiculous tropes, and there's a difference between a cult movie with just some silliness to it. But when it comes to a midnight movie, I will fall asleep after finishing half a bottle of bourbon trying to get through this movie at midnight, because this is where you have to have a level of intrigue. And I'm sure people love this movie and people will see this movie at midnight or just rewatch it. For me, I can't, because the sloppiness of it is an annoyance to me. The sloppiness of these cool characters that have the potential. You have like you said, the rag from riches, the Romeo and Juliet aspect of it, the ridiculous ending. All those have elements to be something over the top, or at least be something memorable. And we don't do anything here. It took me 2 days to get through this movie just to get into it, because again, there's nothing that really drives this movie to have me care. So it's hard for me, at least, to call this something worthy of a cult movie when it's a struggle to get through.
Yeah, well, you had to watch it over 2 days. I watched it twice in 2 days. That's where you and I differ. But anyways, okay, so two very interesting conversations about two very different films from the 80s for our High School Royale. So that was a good conversation about two, like I said, interesting films. I'm curious to see what the audience and listeners have to say about it. So everyone tune in for next week, where we will be bringing our conversation of the films Dangerously Close and Encino Man. I don't know, kind of an unfair competition, but very... they're on two sides of the spectrum, and maybe that'll be a better conversation than this one because TUFF TURF is its own thing. Like, TUFF TURF is its own monster, and yeah, but I still love it. Cool.
Next week is going to be interesting, and you're right, it is going to be two opposite movies. It's hard to compare it, but you know, it'll at least encourage people to rewatch them and see which one has a more rewatchable value, I guess. I don't fucking know how.
You know me. Rewatchability is how I judge a movie and give it a score. Is, can I watch this again? Will I put it on the shelf with the intent to watch it again? That's where I come from. Everyone, thank you for listening, watching. Please like, rate, review the Cultworthy Cinema Podcast. Please go and check out Back to the Balcony, our Siskel and Ebert podcast. You can find me, cultworthy.com. You can find my friend Justin Henson over at
themoviewire.com.
Stay tuned for part 2. We will see you next week.